I think most of us are back. Mr. John, I see you. Thank you, Bob. Mr. John, I see you in the wings. Feel free to jump in. Awesome. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. I like that. Uh, how how was your last weekend? Everything was good. I think you say you love hiking and trailing. Did you go to any hikes this last couple of weeks?
No hikes this weekend, so it's more lacrosse game. So until the lacrosse season's over with my son, we'll be hanging out there. So we he's going into the playoffs this weekend, so we'll do that one more time and then get back on the trails.
Lacrosse is the game I'm still trying to understand. Means I come from the world of cricket and maybe field hockey, but this is completely different. Actually, my youngest son, is pretty small. He and the neighbor's son, they trying to teach it, and he's telling me the rules. So like it's like okay, I believe you. So have you played lacrosse? Are you a lacrosse player?
I played in high school, but not no further than high school. So just a fan of the game, and my son's played since he was 4 years old. So we've had, I guess, 16 years of watching him play.
Nice, nice. What apart from lacrosse or maybe hiking, what do you do for fun, John?
I'm a golfer. I try to be a golfer. So for those who know the sport, it's sometimes more mentally challenging than fun, but certainly it gets you out to the outdoors and relieves some stress. And then, as odd as this sounds, my passion is building businesses. Um, I love starting new businesses. I love scaling businesses, and had a fortunate ability to work for some major brands and some big companies, and learned a lot. And now I try to take my learnings and help out other folks and help them get started and see how far we can get them.
That's an interesting hobby, building businesses. I know you have built the talk about at least one of them. You have done license to innovate, Encamp, in powered lights. But you are an investor, or you actually are a member of them. How do you explain your role in that business building?
Sure. If I can share my screen, I actually had some
Yeah,
slides I was gonna.
the
Uh,
stage is yours.
all right. So just kind of a quick background. So I had I saw some of the participants on the call here. So a shout out to Dustin Lee, who I actually had the pleasure of working with over at Stanley Black and Decker. But spent 20 years of my career at DeWalt and Black and Decker, and been involved in many product development projects, rebranding, relaunches, and learned a lot about how to develop world class products, how to really boil down the simplicity of user work and the simplicity of observation and listening. And so, taking a lot of those learnings, and CEO of Ox has really helped Ox, which is a small business, to kind of start employing some of those disciplines that the bigger brands have, and doing it on a obviously on a conscious budget, but also following the principles of product development to make sure that they're delivering their brand promise. So those two are on the left, more in the tool space. On the right, you can see Encamp. Encamp is a camping company that myself and another industrial designer, I think Dan Cafaro, is actually a professor over at Cleveland Institute of Art.
Yeah, I know, man. That's a small world.
Yeah, so Dan and I work together on Encamp, and certainly when you work with great industrial designers, it just makes the job that much easier, but also that much more fun to really to have a brand promise and have a brand vision and deliver that through intelligent design. And then finally, my wife and I started the company called Empowered Lights, which is a woman-owned business that really focuses on battery backup technology. So I was interested to hear about Bob's background, and maybe Bob and I can connect to do some business. But we do more decorative lamps, but we have a lithium technology inside the lamp so that when power goes out, the lights come on. So it's an automatic switching from AC to DC and provides up to 24 hours of battery backup. So those on the right hand side are my hobbies, and certainly on the left hand side is my back, and the tool side is certainly a passion. But both lighting and camping are fun things to do, and one day they'll be scaled enough, they're big enough that I'll hire whole management teams to run those companies and kind of move on to something else.
Beautiful, beautiful. I enjoyed the listening about the empowered lights. Means when the lights goes off, it automatically sets in. Like that's perfect. And I will spend some time in learning more about NCAM. So over to you. Do you want us to set the stage by sharing some slides?
Sure. I was going to really spend the time on probably the latest project that we're working on, and really kind of go through the essence of Ox. Then if we have time, I was going to go through a project that we were working on with NCAMP and just kind of touch on the finer elements of design and the finer elements of of product functionality, along with the product look and feel.
Perfect. As we talk, both will be perfect. Let's go for it.
Cool. And certainly at any time, anybody got any questions, certainly shout them out, and we can go from there.
Yep.
Cool. So really starting here, this is a project we worked on with a team, and out in Detroit was actually where we did some of the user work. So you can see certainly cold, and learn a couple of unique things about the cold and about hand tools that we probably didn't really appreciate before. So going through really the setup of the discussion kind of goes back to what I mentioned about having that brand vision and understanding what, as I always call, what is your purpose? Why do you exist? If somebody was saying, what is Ox? What do they do? We kind of really boiled it down to, living the trade. We started looking at a lot of the tradesmen out there. We kind of started looking at what we'll call the forgotten trades. So there's a lot of times, the DeWalts of the world will focus on the carpenter, and the Milwaukees of the world on the plumbing, electricians, and HVAC. And we started looking at our user, the bricklayer, the landscaper, the hardscape, drywall. Some of these are not the most glamorous professions, but we started looking at, like, how do we become their champion? How do we become their voice for what they want, to take the pain points that they have in their profession? How do we make it easier? How do we make their jobs more productive? How do we make the ergonomics of the tools better? So that if you're swinging a hammer 8 hours a day, for you and I, it's probably not a big deal for the weekend, but you're doing that 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. It gets tiresome. And what are those pain points?
Yep.
But really, for Ox, it's about living the trade. Being 100% focused and dedicated to the professional contractor. And like any good product development, it's also knowing who you're not. I think COVID, over the last probably 12 months, the tool industry is going through massive growth. And there's certainly a portion of the shareholders and management that would say, boy, we should go after the do-it-yourselfer. Like, we have to go after do-it-yourselfers. That's where the market's growing. It's going crazy. Everybody's fixing up their houses. That's where we need to go. And, made a decision, no, it's not where we need to go. That's not our user. We don't need to cheapen the tools. We don't need to take away the focus on the professional to chase the short-term fad. So that's certainly a point of, I think, as everybody reflects on COVID, there's a lot of opportunities, but there's also a lot of chances to get derailed or get distracted with, I'll call it, shiny objects. So again, for Ox, living the trade, focusing on those forgotten trades. So, what we started to look at is, as we grow and we scale our business, we took a step back to say, hey, what is our visual brand language? What is it that when somebody looked at a product that they would say, yes, absolutely 100%, that's an Ox product? What are those signatures? What are those very subtle features or elements that we could point to say, yes, that's uniquely Ox? Obviously, the color, trying to trademark a color, is the ultimate goal, but trying to trademark a color is also very difficult. Only a few brands have been able to do it. So we do have a unique brand. We have a unique color. Our brand elements are being tough, dynamic, and different, and kind of make sure that tough, dynamic, and different bleeds through the entire range. So we knew that wasn't happening. So that's kind of what we're undertaking now, is looking at, from this point on, what is our VBL, and how do we make sure that the VBL is not just looks, but is truly functional. So that's the project that we're kind of going through now. And as you start looking at your competitive benchmarking, you start seeing elements. And one of the themes or hypothesis that we came up with was, boy, everything's gotten complicated. As we talked about, sometimes it's easier to design a complicated product, and the hardest thing to do is design a simple product. So how do you start looking at what is functional and what is, I'll call it distraction? What is this there for looks and what is there for function? So as we started looking at our competitors, saw a lot of opportunity for what we'll call simplifying the design. As we talk to contractors, as we get feedback from contractors, simple things like the more moving parts, the more chances for breakage, the more bumps, rubber bridges, the more chance for dirt to kind of infiltrate the product. So hearing those different elements, it kind of come back saying, how do we live our brand? How do we make sure, one, we are tough, two, we are dynamic, and then ultimately we're different. So when somebody looks at it on the shelf of Lowe's, they don't just say, hey, that's a red, that's a blue Craftsman tape, or that's a blue DeWalt tape. All the things look exactly like DeWalt, but it's a different color. Easier said than done, but that's also kind of the fun part of design. But ultimately, the process has to start with, for my philosophy, it starts with the user. It's going out there in those cold weather and talking to them, but I think more importantly, observing what people are doing. Most people can't tell you what the problems are. They typically can show you their problems, but they sometimes struggle with the articulation of what it is. So using a combination of factors, sometimes surveys work, sometimes surveys don't. Observations seems to be the best. So we spent 4 hours in the freezing cold and watched what the contractors did.
And you're so right, John. There, as you told last time, also people see one thing, they do one thing, they hear one thing. What they do is completely other, and then how they fill the survey form is way different. So, going back, as you're saying, to the point of origin in the midst of coldness or hotness is the real deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you walk away in 4 hours time, we walked away with, you can see on the left-hand side, you can see all the insights. Simple things. Now, Stanley has been making tapes for 150 years, and yet there's still so many opportunities for improvement, for innovation, and really starting to dissect and digest who is the user, what are they doing. A plumber and a framer are two different people. They both might use tape measures, and they both are probably going to have completely different elements. Yet, the powers to be come back with a simple, here's one product that meets up, that fits all the needs. So our angle is really staying true to those users that we say is about our brand, and delivering a product that works 100% for them. And it might mean that the plumber doesn't like our tape measure, and that's completely okay. So again, going back to that element of making sure you know who the user is, and know that deliver the product they want, not deliver a product that you believe everybody will use, because 9 times out of 10, no one's going to like it. It's going to be in the middle of the road. So there's a lot of challenges in user work, and a lot of challenges in surveys and digesting them. And I think that the point I would make is understand the different elements of the user demands, and make sure that you don't cross all those demands, so that when you put it into the sausage maker, that when it comes back out, you have a tape that no one likes. So that's kind of our challenge now, is dissecting it and say, okay, this is exactly what they want. We have the observations. We know how to solve it. Now it's getting into the phase of prototyping and confirmation. But going through that day, I mean, we did competitive benchmarking, simple things that, again, until you're living the freezing cold, an aluminum tape or a chalk reel sounded like a great idea. Everybody wants an aluminum. It's durable. It's rock solid. Milwaukee's is that way. And then you put it into the hands of the contractor in 10-degree weather, and he says, "Man, I would never use an aluminum chalk reel." And it's like, well, why? It's the most durable. And he's like, it's the coldest. When you go in your hand, I'd rather have a piece of plastic and rubber over molds so that it's not cold to the touch.
Yeah.
Again, just things that you wouldn't find out from a survey, you wouldn't find out from competitive benchmarking. You only find out by going out there and talking to the user. And just observing what the problems they have and what breaks, what can be fixed, and again gathering all that information. And we actually filmed a lot of the testimonies to be able to go back and listen to it and be able to utilize it. 6 weeks after we were there, we still have a good encapsulation of the day. So I'm going to pause there, and I said a lot. Any questions from the group or from yourself?
Means questions will start coming in also, but right now I think a question would be, means what you said about being polarizing is right on dot, right? Means you have to stop being all things to all people. You have to be something to someone, and you literally are following that amazing golden nugget as such. How means with your experience, not only with Ox but Stanley and Black and Decker and DeWalt, how difficult is this to sell it to your marketing or leadership team? What are the barriers that you might find there to push this? Because sometimes the financial Excel sheets might say, hey, let's try to sell everything for everybody. How do you get that argument ahead?
Yeah, I guess there's two things that, as an innovator, as a thought leader, as somebody who wants to challenge, again, being tough, dynamic, and different. A lot of times when you see a first design, I think we talked about the concept car. People will look at a concept car and be like, "Oh my God, it's terrible. It's ugly. I can't. It's not going to work." And then you see it again. You see it 3 times, and then you see it 3 years from now, and it becomes the standard or the norm. But that first person who was bold enough to step out of the norm, you're always going to get criticism. You're going to get groupthink. One of the I guess going back to the management, how you sell them. One of the philosophies that I have is the products can't be designed in the boardroom. As a product developer, you can't let your bias to go into saying this is what I like. Again, going back to my earlier point, I'm not going to use it 8 hours a day. I'm not going to be in 10-degree weather working, framing a house. So I'm not the user, and I think a lot of times management gets in the way of innovation. Management gets in the way of being able to say this is different, and they're afraid that if they're different, they may not be able to sell it. They may not be able to get the confirmation from the customer. Whereas the first person who steps out, yes, you take the risk, but a lot of times you also get the reward of being different and being ahead of the curve. And then in 3 years' time, people will then trying to catch up to you. In terms of the financial aspect of it, trying to be a niche person, I think looking at the financials, it's a big market, and I think if you can get 100% of a smaller market, it might be better than 1% of a large market. So a lot of times it comes down to math of saying, can you make this work? It's too niche of a product. Yes, you're going to have struggles because you're going to have tooling. You have a lot of hard costs that go into the product development process that you won't be able to recoup. So there is a balance, but the reality is that if you deliver the right product to the customer, 9 times out of 10, your financials are going to work. And your sales process gets easier because customers call you. You almost turn the entire sales process upside down. You're not going out there presenting to customers. Your customers are coming to you saying, my customers, the end user, wants to buy this product, and I want to buy it from you. So the economics of pricing swing back to the brand. Come back to that when you have a product that people want and you're different, then you have the economics of probably better margins. So
you touched upon 2 or 3 beautiful elements. I will hold one of them. Let's get the question. I think is from Chris Cunningham. You kind of started to, I would say, answer that. His question is, how do you align leadership to polarizing being a good thing? I think let's try to take it to the world of overall brand strategy. This polarization from a product perspective is good because you are targeting a segment. It might be tilers and plumbers and not roofers, and you design it for them. That's really good. But does that layers go to the entire brand itself? Is that aligned with Ox being a specific brand for these things and not for these things? The brand and the product strategy has to be in line.
Yeah, so let me break that down. So I guess one, getting leadership aligned goes back to good user work. And if leadership appreciates the voice of the customer, then your facts will set you free. um, if you can show why the product is designed that way, why the elements are there, what user observation, what user feedback drove that work. Um, Again, sometimes you might have leadership that might not appreciate the process, and you have to convince them. But I think any good product company leadership has learned over the years that the end user, the customer, is the boss. And as long as you've done your homework, then they should fall in line. Again, I say should. We all know that sometimes the ego gets in the way and arrogance gets in the way, but I think good user work usually will help define why this product looks this way and why it is the right answer.
You're so right about the earlier point you said. I think in the design school, the professor should make the designers write 500 times on the wall, I am not the user, I am not the user, because our own confirmations, our own biases can get into your own way of trying to understand the empathy of the real users as such. Continuing to the question over there, I think it was still Chris's question. I think it will read, how do you balance the user needs versus the customer needs? So I know you're telling us to look at the end users and the ecosystem and their needs and wants and aggravations and problems, but that customer is in between, right? Means you're eventually selling it to maybe a single person at Lowe's or Home Depot. How do you balance that win-win situation?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a reality. And probably through my 25 years getting pounded on the head, you can never be a purist. And I usually love the industrial designers be the purists, and I have to be the realist sometimes, because you do have to consider the customer. And I think go back to competitive benchmarking. I think part of the convincing a customer is being able to understand the I guess the give and take of their listing. So, for example, Lowe's, I'm going to look at what are the competitive products they have on the shelf today. What are the price points? What are the feature sets that they're offering? What are their competitors? So, Home Depot, what is Home Depot offering? And I start to kind of in the, I guess, left quadrant, start framing out what is my scope. Where can I play? Um, and then I balance the next quadrant of saying, here's what the user is saying, here's what the market reality is. So you kind of put all these quadrants in, and then in the center, you're kind of coming back saying, okay, the biggest frustration for the user is the fact that the tape only lasts 6 months. Okay, now I'm gonna start feeling out well, if I gave you twice as much life, would you pay 50% more? What are my I guess parameters to say how far can I go? But all that, for anybody who cooks, I mean, it's the recipe. You're putting everything in there to be able to, and at the end, you taste it and say, okay, this is going to work. I can charge 20% more because I have these facts that back up why the customer will pay for it. Um, and you constantly are challenging yourself. You constantly are rethinking the approach. So there's really not you can't be stubborn. You have to be able to say, yeah, this thing's absolutely worth $49.99 when every competitive product out there is $9.99. You might be able to get away with this, but you have to constantly challenge your assumptions and then verify your assumptions back to the customer and back to the user. So a lot of times big companies don't want to involve the customer. One of the things that I love about a smaller company like Ox is that I can sit down with a buyer and I can say, let me put all the cards on the table. Is it risky? Sure, it's risky. Everything's risky in life. But if I sat down and get the buy-in from the customer during the process, then then they're bought in. They know where you're going, so it doesn't become a sales pitch. So my advice would be, don't be afraid to get your customer involved in product development. I'm sure that many people will say you're wrong, John. You can't do that. There's intellectual property. There's all these other legal rules. But the reality is that if you can get their insight and if you can get their parameters and you can get their buy-in, you then have that one more ingredient to the recipe to say, when I launch, I will be successful.
That's beautiful, and we can connect this later too. But I think this was a great pause, and if you're okay, let's continue with the
Sure.
next section. But this is really good.
Yeah, so the fun part of after you start doing a lot of your user work, you start getting the ideation, you start getting the inspiration, and for all the industrial designers on the call, this is really where you start letting your mind kind of be creative and kind of think about the visualization of a solution, and kind of see where the trends are today. As I said, we had a theory of simplicity that we were going into it. Again, you have to have a hypothesis, and again, you're constantly challenging those hypotheses through facts and research. But you started getting into like what's the look and feel of the current stage. So that's the stage we're kind of at now of looking at what inspiration can we take from other products. And then you going into the point of polarizing. You kind of get into this stage of like, wow, like, okay, here's what the benchmark today, here's what everything looks. And if you look at the top row, if you took the brands off those top rows, you took the colors away, you probably wouldn't be able to identify who is who. And that's kind of the goal that we had, is we want to be able to take the brand off of it. We want to be able to say that's a Knox product. Absolutely 100%. Don't even need the color or the brand. I want it to be able to know. And yes, the question about selling leadership for the people on the call that is involved in this was polarizing. This was absolutely like, no, like this was, John, you're on the wrong track. And that's the one thing I would say about the process, is that it's an iterative process. Again, you're not married to a design, you're married to a solution. And as long as you keep the solution in mind, the form factor can go many different directions. And what you start with is not what you're going to finish, but you have to be married to the solution. So won't go through a lot of this detail because this is all still probably very confidential, but we took all those feedbacks, and a lot of those elements you see on the tapes, as polarizing as they are, it's a solution. And when you explain it to a customer, they get it. They understand why. The end user says, "Yep." Still have to go through confirmation, but the visual aspect becomes the ability to be different. But the solution is going to be what makes it dynamic and tough. So yeah, this is kind of the art of going through the process. But to be bold, to be different, it is scary. It's a lot of times doing up top, if we went with the third tape measure over, it would be easy. Everybody would look at it and say, "Yep, that's what a tape measure should look like, John." So perfect, you're right on the right track. But then down below starts challenging the status quo.
Makes sense.
So on that, I'm going to pause there. So I'm going to switch over to kind of reinforcement to see it from another angle. And again, going from corporate America down to kind of entrepreneur, the same principles can be applied. I went from $1 million budgets down to no budget, yet the process can still be applied. So the beauty of a good product development process is that it doesn't have to be expensive, and you can spend as much money or as little money as long as you follow the process.
So it will be great to segue into that. But if you want, let's take one or two questions to wrap up with let's say this is tool category. And it's beautiful, by the way. To answer Gary, your question, which design did you end up with? This is still not yet in the market. So I think eventually, John, or we will let you know when it's in the market and which is the final one that's chosen. But coming back, taking one more question from the audience, Erica has a question. Means no matter what, we understand actual ethnography, observation, going to the point of origin, and you get your testing and observation done. But apart from that, in your entire line of scope, not only for OX, we also engage into surveys. So how do you compare the quality of these online surveys to the actual physical user testing? Any similarities, differences, like aha moments?
Yeah, no. So I on surveys, and I think you now the surveys should be a tool. That shouldn't be a end all be all. It should kind of help complement all the other work. I usually like surveys as I'll call it a red flag event, not to be confused with red flag laws, but the red flag event. So I can go talk to 400 people, and we just did the survey, um, through our Tough Club, through our members. We just did a quick survey, not that we wanted to use it as factual data, as more as roadmap or directional. And quite honestly, what kind of feedback did we get? I'll go through a survey. I don't like the summary of a survey, so I don't like somebody saying, okay, 73% of the people like that, 16% like that, and use that as a guide. I like reading the comments. I like trying to have at least open-ended comments so that people can say, why do they like it? Why did they choose this one? And I find, even though it's tedious, I find reading 400 pieces of feedback either alerts me to something, a trend that I might have missed in my user work, or a concern that somebody has, or just a bias that we have. So on this tape measure example, um, things like I'm not really worried about the design. I'm worried about the durability of the product. So things like durability have to kind of be conveyed in the product design. Things like I don't want any kind of I don't I'm worried about my tools being dirty, which sounds bizarre for contractors, but there was many comments about, hey, I like the all black tape measure. Branding wise, we want blue. We want blue. Contractor says blue's going to get dirty and it's going to look like crap. I'd rather have the black one so that it always looks good and it doesn't show the dirt. So things like that, I probably wouldn't hang my hat that that's an element that I would go with, but it allows me to have some different thoughts. And again, just as I said it before, pressure test your hypothesis. So surveys allow you to kind of say, okay, here's something I didn't think of, or here's something that confirms. It's not going to be, the only tool I use, but it's simply one that I use to kind of reinforce or discover new ideas.
That's perfect. I think we can pause that segue and we can. I'm looking forward to look at this NCAM design too.
So this is again a project that we're working on, and I'm sure many people are probably like, "How's this guy sleep? Does he? He's got 47 different design projects going on." But as you know, working with great, passionate industrial designers, as I said earlier, it's fun because the designers think differently, but also can bring a whole new element to product development. So for this one, this is kind of Dan kind of doing the homework, as we said before. Same thing like as an Ox, you would basically go through and do your user work. This is an example of doing research on a knife. For NCamp, our brand mission is to design products and build products that help elevate the outdoor experience. So we're about compact products. So the N in NCamp is really about nano. So making sure that when we design things, we're designing them for size, compact size, maybe not necessarily for weight, because we're looking at more of the function and the ease of use than for our target market. Our target market is probably more the casual camper than the person who's going to hike the Appalachian Trail. who's going to go out for 6 months and is worried about ounces versus pounds. Our brand essence is about the person who wants to have a great outdoor experience, who wants to go out and cook their filet in the woods versus pouring water into a pouch and eating mush. So we always say it's about making a meal, not mush. Is kind of our brand mantra. So
One of my good friend is right now on the AT trail, started 10 days ago. It's exactly like that. Ounces and mush. Like, it's like, why are you doing this?
so if you're into fillets and Cabernet on the hiking trail, then we're the brand for you. So we go out there and we have everything from a bamboo prep surface that allows you to have the ability to cut things up and actually make the ingredients. And we started noticing that the knife I think that Dan was using was a standard pocket knife. So we saw that there was this folding Japanese knife that was out there, and said, "Wow, that would be awesome to round out our product range." We have a stove, we have the prep surface, carrying case, we have the coffee maker. Let's continue with this theme and not build a product, but build a total solution. So the knife came in to say, okay, we bought the knife and we said, boy, that's a terrible knife. It looks good and it serves the purpose, but certainly was not what we thought was a solution. So start breaking into, okay, here's your competitive benchmark. Here's why, trying to almost reinvent or re-engineer, how did they come up with this design? What were they thinking? What was their elements? And sometimes you scratch your head saying, I'm not sure where they clearly missed some elements. So that's what we found here, that this knife didn't feel good in your hands, didn't have the proper curvage to be able to cut properly. So this is the best camping chef knife on the marketplace, and it had a lot really didn't have the functionality that we believe that we needed. So that was kind of the working premise. You can see, your knuckles hit the ground before the knife does. So the curve is not correct. It's if you want to go through a chef and you want to. So we now found an element that a camping chef knife that's folding doesn't exist. So boom, that's as simple as it is. That's the innovation. So how do you then get into the design and start working through? And for all the folks on the call, it's an iterative process. You start going through, and the funny part about this one was Dan actually made, if you can see on the right hand side, Dan made a working prototype that he could change out the handles and he could narrow down the blade size and handle size. So he took very different styles and went through and said, okay, let me do in a COVID friendly way, because we had to change our research. We couldn't do group research. We couldn't have a group of people come through. We had to wipe down the samples after every use just to make sure we were being COVID compliant. But you now have all these different elements that you kind of put together to say, what is the correct design? What is the one that feels right in hands, not just Dan's hands, but 15 other people that you go through to make sure that it meets the elements. And then, I think somebody said about surveys. So we backed it up with, regular face-to-face research, but then we also backed it up with some surveys to be able to kind of validate some of the information and kind of get some more quant information versus, the actual observation. So again, good balance of, what are the things that could alert you to an issue? What are the things that are important? If you're looking to buy a new knife, what are the things that are important to you? Again, to be able to have that statistical data to be able to go back and verify your design or your product. So then, you kind of get to a point where you now have what you believe is the right solution, and then then the fun starts. Can you manufacture it? So then you work through the element of getting this to, getting a actual working prototype, getting a knife manufacturer that's an expert in design and manufacturing, and then get their 2 cents into, can this be produced? Can it be produced affordably? And that's kind of the phase we're in right now, is that we're basically have finalized the 3D CADs. We had the manufacturer give their 2 cents and kind of look at the pivot points and all the different pieces, and Now we're now into the tooling phase where we'll tool it and we'll get our first shots off the tooling, and again come back out with one more confirmation that we have the right product. So yeah, it's I guess the process of this is my own company, so this is a company where we have very limited resources, and through the beg, borrow, and steal philosophy, you can do the same exact process that a Stanley Black and Decker would do, that any big design firm would do. You can definitely do a lot of these elements and not have to spend a ton of money doing it. So I would encourage anybody who's in product development that it really is getting your process determined, and know that you have to be flexible in the process, but at the same time you have to be rigid to the goal of the process, or the ultimate reason why you're doing it. And again, it's not for you. The biggest original sin in product development is don't design the product for you. Make sure you're designing it for your target user. So that's all I had there.
So is it finally, that's it, by the way, the knife development is pretty amazing. What is the timeline further for that project?
Sure. So we should be launching in October of this year. So we'll have everything probably finalized. We'll have our first samples take back out and confirm, but we'll have that all probably wrapped up by June, go into production. So we probably should have product here in September to launch in October.
Awesome. And by the way, this is a product that might be near and dear of the product domain for me. I work with David Thiem. He has plenty of knives and he is an outdoors person way more than me. But I do not know whether you know that I'm a knife collector. I collect smaller knives and swords also. One of the one that I always keep on me is this Beretta kind of thing. It's a gentleman knife. It's not an outdoors knife or something. But knife is something, a tool that I think everybody has, and everybody has no matter what, a visceral connection to the knife. If you are a knife person, means it's finally a blade, but there are so many things that, as you mentioned, how it's going to be stored, what is the context. A knife in a house is different, knife in a camping is different, in the camping AT is different versus a normal glamping kind of a thing. I would be looking forward to looking at this knife in the real market. So about the process or the approach, are you going it through Kickstarter, or what are the things that one should be thinking in this startup entrepreneurial world? Use of Kickstarter or not?
No, you nailed it. So we're going to do a Kickstarter campaign for the there's two styles of knives. So we'll have those, and it'll help us kind of promote our brand. And some of the rewards will be everything from additional the prep surface that we have, the stove that we have. So we'll have the different ways to bundle the knives. So it's much more about just not only the product, but also the brand and what we have there. So that will be our first, I guess, going back to NCamp, how it came about. Dan originally went to Kickstarter, and Dan didn't get fully funded on Kickstarter. I had a friend of a friend and who introduced us. So as soon as I was leaving Stanley Black & Decker, my first introduction was to Dan. Dan and I hit it off. We had a very good, I guess, working relationship in terms of philosophy. And I certainly appreciate industrial design and the passion for product development. But ultimately, as we went through the stove was the first product. We start thinking about how to go to market. We start thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to go license this stove to Coleman? Are we going to go license this stove to Solo Stove? What are we going to do to the market? And as we kept coming back to it, we started thinking, well, boy, do you have any other ideas? And Dan's like, oh yeah, I have a prep surface that goes along with this, a coffee maker, all these different elements. And then we had the aha moment of, and this is not a product. This is a brand. This can be a collection of products. And as a old corporate guy, I thought it would be easy. I said, boy, we developed hundreds of products. We did DeWalt, 20 volt and the whole product line. And so very quickly learned the joys of cash flow and being an entrepreneur, which has been super rewarding, but at the same token, allows you to appreciate that building a brand in any context is hard. Building a brand as an entrepreneur is extremely hard. So I think anybody who is in that entrepreneurial side, you can think about the product, but you also have to think about, just as important, think about the brand and how you bring branding to your entrepreneurial endeavor. And the more you can have that story about your brand, the story of why you're there, um, that's magic. People want to root for the underdog, and I think this that simple thing of, tell your story. People talk about the elevator pitch. I go back to that. Your brand has to have meaning, and the meaning isn't it looks cool or I got a cool logo. It's more about what is the essence, what's the deep down meaning of your brand, and are you living it? Are you delivering that every day? From everything from the website experience to the customer service experience to the product experience, are you delivering on your brand promise?
That's beautiful, and we will. There are so many questions just not in my mind, but I think on the floor also. So when you talk about means personally means this really works good, because I would say this will not be just applicable for real camping, because when I go to picnics with friends, and these are at metro parks, there's a shelter and everything is still not camping, but a little bit more just a picnic. Over there, my wife doesn't allow me to steal her expensive knives, so I have to find a knife that it will be mine, but I can still take to a shelter in a picnic slot to still do the cutting and chopping, which is not the real knives as such. So I think there is another market where a person like me would love to have that always in the pocket when we are in this semi, not completely in the outdoors, but not completely inside too.
So if I translate that, so my first samples need to go to you for testing.
Oh my, I would. Uh, I'm, as I said, I'm a collector of knives, not just actual utility knives, but actually Leathermans and multi tools, and plus I would say ornate ones also. I love camping. I will absolutely do it for you. It's camping and outdoors is a part of what we do. So we'll talk about that later too. But coming back to not just this and camp, but let's go back to ox tools or any tool. Let's go back to the tenets of industrial design. And this might be a loaded question. You mentioned that couple of times. When let's say you or Dan or David, you are sitting together, we are all sitting together as a designer, and your pencil is going to touch the paper, what should go in the mind? You should keep the product as the focus or the brand as the focus? What is the starting point?
Cool. That's a good one. I would say that this might be cliche, but think about the solution, and make sure you're working from the solution back. The elements of branding, the elements of design can be added. I don't want to offend anybody, but I think making sure that you solve the problem first, and then the design should help complement or enhance or communicate that solution. Does that make sense?
It means again there are so many different perspectives and point of views to that. As I said, it's a loaded question. Means I will have my take. We can go around the table and people will have their take. But I think more and more we are trying to see a little bit more experimentation in that world. Earlier, people had a strong affinity, like these are our brand pillars. Or let's go back to an everyday example. Let's go to let's say car styling. If let's say we are BMW, the kidney beans are the shape we have to go with. Everything else has to revolve around that. It can be still fresh and refreshed as thing, but eventually everybody is given that point of origin. And then based on that, there might be other elements that might be coming in or out. The other part would be like, let's stop about looking at the brand pillars. Let's try to see literally what is this changing ecosystem right now, not because of COVID, but different use cases are overpiling on each other, how we find a new uncontested market space for that. And then let's try to see what the product needs are, and it fits the brand pillars or it does not. When I say brand pillars, we're not about tough or bold or risky, about, I would say, still the VBL clues as such. So I think there is a pretty good, again, this goes to the element that you were saying about polarization. We have to see what are the real needs of the multi-users and making sure we are putting that as our quest rather than having to always have a lead over there. So it's I should not say the jury's out there, but somehow we did cover about that, how it has to be solution oriented rather than this kind of an aha moment in your mind. I think you're showing us some examples to illustrate that point.
Yeah, no. So going back to like the brand pillars. So again, some of the design elements, are added in there, but ultimately the stove started out as a collapsible combustion chamber. So the solution was the combustion chamber, and then built around it was the visual look and feel of the product, so that it was different. It was unique. It wasn't your father's Coleman stove. And then those elements start becoming the themes around making sure you're incorporated into the other designs. So the sleeve on the silicone sleeve on the coffee maker just made sense to put the honeycomb design into that sleeve. So a lot of those things I won't say are afterthoughts, but certainly now give it the element of, yes, this is a consistent family. This is a consistent look. This is something that somebody went the extra mile. And in today's day and age of copycats and Chinese knockoffs, having something that somebody can look at and say, I can tell somebody spent the extra time to think about the product, think about the look, and think about the functionality and how it all fits together. So I think that's the beauty of design, is that when it all comes together, there's a solution, and then there's an emotional feel that gets portrayed into the design.
That's perfect. These emotions, it might be as a single thing, as a blade in the hand, which you are using to maybe cut a pear or something on the trail, but the emotional overriding functionality is always there, present in anything we do as a humankind. Means we are based on the emotive perspective a lot. Coming back to a couple of questions, means I think as our audience was RSVPing themselves to the webinar, we also try to collect plenty of questions from over there. I'm just going to select some of them which are appropriate for our discussion over here. This one is from Troy. What would it take for the industry, and this might be again the entire industry, to give more than a passing consideration to being a more sustainable design, a little bit more greener manufacturing? What should be the, so now we are not talking about just Ox or Stanley, just going back to the entire ecosystem as such. Is this time still really right for sustainability in the world of tool manufacturing?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, because I think those who've been in power tools, hand tools, unfortunately, we've gone through probably a 15, 20-year phase of disposable tools. Um, and maybe it's regulations, maybe it was, but there used to be metal housings. If you pull out your grandfather's drill, it was bulletproof. It was something that would last 50 years versus lasting 50 days. So I think there's a real element of a resurgence of durability and something that's going to last long. And know that has a cost, but I absolutely feel that there is going to be, the next cycle is designing things that will last a generation, that can be passed down to the next generation. I think that art is lost, and I do believe that could be a simple innovation, whether it's material selection, whether it's technology. Um, I coming from the power tool side, it always pained me to watch how many lithium batteries or how many NiCad batteries a company would go through. And yes, you want to get them recycled, but boy, there's a lot of batteries that we're going through. So, the day of having electricity as your source in a generator or a panel are now translated over to cordless technology. And I think I'm hoping that big manufacturers, unfortunately, Ox doesn't have the resources they have, but hoping that the bigger companies are thinking about how to make a battery that is much more sustainable than what we have today. But yeah, I do think there is a massive opportunity.
I completely second those thoughts about sustainability is not just choosing, let's say, and just a material packaging or something else. Is about how to make sure you can design that is indestructible, it is still useful, and it can last for generations and generations. And knives being one of them, and I have a couple of knives passed down from my dad, and that's how it all started. Typically, there are plenty of equipment in the house that literally is designed to go on maybe wristwatches also. But you mentioned about sustainability and the materials. I remember the first assignment I had when I was in school, in the design school, and you will know this, John. We had the professor was maybe having fun with us. First assignment he gave to us, like it was back in India near Bombay, like, hey, this is the beach on Bombay. Design a bench for it. Think about anything, design the best bench. And everybody went on like doing cartwheels, like we brought out cork and glass and this and that materials as a part of the call outs. And eventually making a long story short, it came out like, no, sometimes just do, you have to understand the context where it is going to be in 1.2 billion people, and the amount of wear and tear and the amount of vandalism and theft and robbery. If we do something in aluminum, it's gone the next day. It's a sad thing to say, it will be gone the first night. And then eventually it came down to concrete, and then the sustainability and the longest durability part of it is not just about nature, but durability in that ecosystem. Even it lasts for 10 years, that's good, because that's what you finally want for. So sustainability is not just a material exchange to cork or bamboo. It is about understanding the context, understanding what's going to happen over there, what are the different forces happening from the multi-users, and then bringing it all together. I know we are coming towards already towards the time as such, and there are still questions, and maybe we can pass on some of the questions to the next ones. Uh, Coming back to your end camp, or just starting a business, or starting a new product design business. When right now, if you go, most of people or younger kids will start an app or something, and that's a business. Nothing wrong in that. But you and maybe the students from a CIA took on designing product and then starting a physical business. Do you want to share some nuggets of wisdom in what might be those some of the barriers in starting your own product based business, and what might be some of the amazing things that you should be looking out for while starting in the ramp up of the business? Anything that might help on our audience who are thinking of inventing or going to the next stage?
Okay, hopefully nobody's from these groups. First of all, Shark Tank's not real.
I love your honesty.
You can't throw money at starting a business. Yes, money helps, but there are so many other things that are more important than money. I guess my biggest advice, and again, being critical of the industry, things like invent help are probably the last thing you need to be worrying about when you're starting a company. I mean, what you really want to get to is you want to get passionate customers. You want to get your product where people are going to respond to the product, that are going to be just as passionate about your brand and being just as passionate about making you successful. So my advice to anybody is go slow, and it probably goes against every book or everybody that is in the industry, but big mistake or going fast usually generates big mistakes. And as I said before, unless you have unlimited amount of cash, you have to be very precious. You have to be very careful with your cash and making sure you're doing things correctly, but you're also doing things that are economically beneficial. So starting small, and for NCAMP, yeah, a devastating day is we got a review on Amazon where the guy absolutely destroyed the product, hated the product. And we had to dive into, okay, why? What were the issues? And we go back to your brand pillars. Compact products was critical. However, the airflow on the product was not correct. So we did not get the fins on the top piece, needed to be higher. So we could try to rationalize things. So I guess the other part is, don't rationalize feedback. A lot of times people will, and I'll be critical, designers will get feedback and then they'll say, well, why isn't that? Well, he's not the right user, or, he was using it incorrectly. He was using wet wood, blah, 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 blah. I have a philosophy of, when you get feedback, assume you have a problem until you prove you don't, which kind of gets you to a point you're kind of paranoid, you're hypercritical. But starting a business, you had to be critical of yourself, and you have to take feedback and adjust. So within probably 3 months, we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's redesign it. Let's get it correct. Let's retool it. As much as it was hard to do, we also didn't bet big. The first lot that we made 500 pieces. So knowing that as much testing and as much user work you do, you're not going to get it perfect on the first time. So allow yourself enough flexibility to make mistakes. So don't spend all your money on 5,000 pieces, because you think if you get 500 pieces and you sell 500 pieces, life is good. You order more. But if you're wrong and you have to correct, you didn't bet the farm. So that's probably the biggest thing in corporate America. If we did a product launch, we wanted to launch with 150,000 pieces. So we had to spend a lot of time getting the process. We spent a lot of money. We spent a long time getting everything perfect, because when you went to go, it was a big bet. It was millions and millions of dollars. As a small company, bet $10,000, prove it out. Bet $20,000, prove it out, and go through this process of learning. And that when you do have a mistake, you haven't devastated the company, and you don't feel like it's okay. It was learning. It's part of the process and part of learning. So that's probably, as an entrepreneur, test and learn, bet small, learn small. And then when you're ready, we're in year 4 now. We're now going through production runs we're making 10,000 pieces, because now we have high confidence in the process, high confidence in our suppliers, and have proved it out. But I would never have day one have bet $100,000 on a new product.
That's beautiful, John. And we'll keep on conversing more and more and more. But I think we should try to wrap this up. And I already see Phil in the wings over here on the stage. And maybe one day we can have you on our startup panel, and we can talk about your ornamental battery charging lights out. I would say a startup, a business too sometime. But
Yep,
thank
absolutely.
you for your time over here. This is wonderful. And feel free to just unmute yourself, unvideo yourself, and be on the panel for the next ones. And we will, within a couple of minutes, we will go to the next speaker. Thank you once again.